Thanks for joining. Thanks for staying. For those who are staying, I think you've seen pretty much everyone here presenting before, but still, we'll do some introductions. We are here to discuss how LoRaWAN can enable making economies of scale. And we have like experts that will share their own opinions here, and I'm just here to moderate. So my introduction is super short. I'm Olivier. I'm going to be your moderator. The interesting people are here. So I'm going to go around and ask for some introductions. One thing I'm asking you to do is like be short and share one original LoRaWAN project you worked on. Something funny, something weird. Keep it weird. And that should be part of your introduction. Catherine, how about you?
I've got a good one. I just thought of that. So we're in the process of trying to save turtles. And the reason for that is that when turtles nest, if the sand temperature is over 18 degrees Celsius, it will only hatch male turtles. So with literally in the city that I live, we are using LoRaWAN with the local municipality. We are measuring with soil moisture probes the temperature of the sand, and then we're linking that to irrigation to cool the sand so that it doesn't get above 18 degrees. There you go.
Damn.
The bar is
I've
hot.
got nothing as new as that. I'm going to go back to the old rhino horn. Drilling holes in rhino horns so that you can save the rhino. That still strikes me. I mean, again, I know, hey, it's the old tracks always play best, don't they? But, I mean, that's one of the older odd use cases, but it still stands out to me as one that was really a very, very novel use of the technology at the time, and it remains so. But, yes.
All right, Daniel, I work for Multitech. I have to rack my mind going back at least 7 or 8 years now. But we worked with a company who did a screen, like digital signage. It was about the size of a tablet. Wasn't quite as high fidelity as a tablet, although it was better than Minecraft. It had like color light green and dark green, and they could do a monotone kind of images, and they could put text on there, and you could use it in retail, buy one get one free. You could put it up in a convention center to say that the things industry is now on in this theater. Don't think it ever really went anywhere, definitely not a sensor, but a little digital signage piece of equipment, probably the most bizarre thing I ever saw with LoRaWAN in it.
All right. Well, you said weird and original, so I'm going to hit on the toilet paper use case. I think just not running out of toilet paper is weird, but also impressively good outcome of IoT, and it's a problem we're solving.
That's why we did it in the first place, isn't it? That was the whole purpose.
But that's interesting. We'll discuss the need to address an actual problem. And I think that one is a good one here. So now that we know a bit more about each of you, what we want to go into is your experience when it comes to execute or deploy LoRaWAN successfully to achieve economy of scales. And so I will start with you, Catherine. You worked for the last 8 years or more on different types of projects, different types of industries. Smart City is just one of them. Can you let us know what are your key learnings over that time span on this kind of projects?
My key learning is start with the problem you're trying to solve and from the use case above. Because by knowing that, you save yourself a lot of time making sure that you are getting the right information. So we've learned a lot with that. And that's really important in the industrial and in the transport sector. So when they say, oh, Catherine, we want to do pedestrian counting. Okay, where do you want to put this? And so you have the conversation about what type of pedestrian counting, what is the purpose of this? And that's really important because then you have some selection of different ways of getting the data with different types of sensors, and then that helps inform how you design the network. So I think that's been our key learning. I think originally, many years ago, people were of the view that you just put these gateways out there and people would come up with great ideas. It's not the way that, in our experience, that has panned out. So I hope that I've explained. It's start from the sensor or the use case and work above.
So if anyone
I'm kind of in the back room of LoRa with the nuts and bolts and watching other people do great things. But I'd say, along a similar line, actually, I think the biggest thing I learned, shut up and listen to the customer. Because at the end of the day, if you can't understand the business case that they're trying to achieve, everything else is just a waste of time. And I do think that, I did talk about this morning, as engineers and as technologists, we're always eager. It's like, no, you shouldn't have asked me that question. You should have asked me this question. I could do much more. No, you've got to start with the business case and stay, as you said, solely focused on that, deliver against it. And simple though that sounds, it's not very frequently that happens.
Agreed. But it applies beyond LoRaWAN, right? It's
pretty much everything in life.
We should all do that and apply that, right? So Dan, where do you see this economy of scales happening? What kind of industries do you see that chasm being crossed by LoRaWAN?
Yeah, so that chasm concept, for those of you perhaps not familiar with that, you've got the bleeding edge adopters, wanting to transform the world, understand everything, very small percentage of the world. You've got the early adopters who are then bringing that into their products and services, and then you've got the early majority. And going from those early adopters to the early majority, that's the chasm. And I think from our perspective at Multitech, we absolutely see that we've crossed that chasm in retail. What retail store is not doing digital food compliance now? And that requires temp sensors in all the fridges, reporting what the inner temperature of that food is. And all the biggest brands are doing that globally. So that's millions of sensors now going into that one application in supermarkets. Very similar food chain management, compliance happening in quick serve restaurants, the McDonald's, Chick-fil-A's and so on in this world. So again, in these quick serve restaurants and retail segments, we've crossed the chasm. And I think in commercial real estate, we're in that crossing the chasm. Insurance claims are the biggest for water damage outside of natural disasters. Billions of dollars a year paid out in water damage. So being able to track, detect that, it's not always cataclysmic. Sometimes it takes time. So these markets have definitely crossed the chasm. I think the ones that are next behind us, a little bit more complicated, more industrial, energy, oil and gas, utilities. This is in the early adopter stage now, but shows great potential.
Great. Joshua, anything to add from Ox's perspective, your experience over the years?
Yeah, I certainly think that we've enabled people to be more successful and made it easier. But I still have one of my favorite phrases. It's never been easier in IoT to make a mistake. There's so many options out there now. It's tough even as an engineer to approach a problem, to figure out what tools to leverage. And I think that we keep inundating people with more and more tools. Obviously, we're entrepreneurial and money driven. But at the end of the day, I think some of the best innovations are what we're enabling. And so going back to the chasm, to me, I'm very bullish, and some of the things I'm most excited about are in the innovation space, doing device-to-device communication. So one of my favorite use cases is the natural gas alarm triggering the valve to actually shut off the natural gas. A, we can save lives, but B, if you look at like a smoke alarm, it goes off, you just have to leave the property. This is a use case that it goes off and then we're triggering something. And I think when I look at the IoT and the evolution and things, it's about how are we actually creating value, and can we push that value beyond data to actually taking an action. And then when we can automate that full loop, it's really beautiful. But honestly, I'm just getting more and more excited. I think the large language models and what's happening with ChatGPT, not to throw a buzzword into it, and then looking at how that's going to impact the IoT. I know I shared a little bit about that with some of the group at the dinner table last night, and I'm continuing to be bullish around how that's going to transform, not just giving people data, but telling them how to leverage that data. And that's really what I'm excited about right now.
So innovation definitely being a driver here, right, for making that possible. So, Alistair, let's talk about challenges. Like when we're preparing this little panel, you came up with the fact that, and actually everyone came up with the fact that IoT in general is complex. LoRaWAN is no exception. There are complexities there. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a bit more about what they are by experience that potential future customers have to think about today before even getting started?
Well, I mean, honestly, I think one of the biggest challenges is still the being able to source in volume high-quality sensors. I mean, and you have, folks like Josh's company out there building very high-quality product, but there's a real, and you talk of crossing the chasm, I mean, there's also a chasm between, ordering 100 devices and ordering 10,000 devices. And I think that's it's a real catch-22 situation because there isn't the business there yet today to justify people building whole production lines for a particular sensor type. But because those production lines aren't there aren't the opportunities because customers, as they look for solutions, hit these roadblocks very early on and kind of stop and say, well, I'll wait a couple of years and I'll do it in a couple of years' time when I can actually source the parts or I can source the sensors I need.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about that, Alistair. I see the issue more going into custom design. You can place orders for tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of sensors onto Multitech. We've got 5 production lines in Minnesota. We're cranking them out. But if you want to have a custom design just for you that does something more integrated, like a hand sanitizer or something, and you're planning to, I don't know, sell millions of them or something, yeah, simple enough. But what happens if you don't have that kind of volume, but you want the customized? That's where the production line concept maybe isn't set up. But the off-the-shelf stuff, I think we're definitely into the tens and hundreds of thousands of those types of off-the-shelf sensors now.
And too much choice is not a problem?
I think on the sensor side, not so much because, sensor fits the job, but it's the bits in between. There's an awful lot of choice when it comes to OHL and STUs and the variety of tools that we have.
Yeah. So, Catherine, your experience on industrial sector, retail sector, do you see that need for simple solutions first? Yeah. Is it something you're seeing a lot?
Yes, I think talk about challenges. So what you've got to understand if we're going to cross the chasm, these big asset-rich organisations, so construction, mining, cities, they already get a lot of data. So the challenge is that when you start to introduce real-time data, make it really simple for the customer to get that data. Don't go into the assumption that they need another platform. You're going to be informing SCADA. You're not going to be replacing SCADA. So the opportunity is to use standards and to integrate that data, and that starts with the data management strategy. So there's no point in embarking on anything unless you have a data management strategy. And the other thing too is they're quite risk averse, but they will innovate fast because it's a competitive advantage, right? So if they can get production faster, and I think just talking about opportunities just quickly, I love Josh's point around AI. So where I see this going, we've had digital twins. Now I think we're going to be moving to the industrial metaverse. And I think that's a huge opportunity for the collection of different data sets where it will, and I love your point about device-to-device communication. I mean, that is fantastic. If you can push that workload to the device so that you can stop, do an alert or something like that, they will buy them in the thousands simply because they can't afford production downtime. And then I think another very underbaked sector that really is going to embrace this is going to be transport. They've gone past the days of intelligent transport systems which have just been doing tolling, but now we're moving into the edge of transport. So how are people moving around? How are they using space? Walking, cycling, EVs. This whole space, I think, is a great opportunity for IoT. The whole sort of nexus between transport and energy as well, I think, is a great opportunity. So anybody out there who's thinking of challenges in smart cities, I think that's a really exciting opportunity.
Thank you. Josh, so what are the other challenges you're seeing? Anything to add to the huge list, or not so huge actually, but the list that your colleagues just shared here?
No, I mean, I agree with everyone and think that the problem is horrific, but also it's opportunity, right? So I think being able to find value in the noise, right? So I think Alistair's point, there is a lot of bad products on the market that keep us from succeeding because those devices give people a poor idea of what LoRaWAN is. I've seen that on both the engineering side. If someone does a custom design themselves and they say LoRaWAN doesn't even transmit that far, and never once do they think that they've implemented it wrong. Similarly, though, if your first trial into LoRaWAN is with a product that hasn't thought through how you're actually going to get it provisioned and hasn't thought through the user experience, and you might go, LoRaWAN doesn't work well. But if you work with the right partner who's thought through those things, certainly Multitech's done a good job with their gateways and some of the outlier organizations that really have been thoughtful throughout the entire process. I think one of the biggest challenges I see is this kind of, we all want to try to stay in our lane, but at the same time, somebody's got to weave all of this together to create value. And so the challenge is, right, someone might just say, oh, I'm just a device manufacturer. Okay, well, customers don't need a device. Customers need value and they need the data. And so how are you helping them get there? And I think that's sort of the challenge, is staying in your lane, but also recognizing that who your customer is and who's the customer of your product and who's leveraging it. Obviously on a technical front, though, I think we've made things really easy today. There's so many blogs, so many YouTube videos. It's so easy to get started. But there's a big difference between getting started and having a solution that you would want to scale up and build 100,000 of. And just because it works once doesn't mean you've made the right choices. And I think people ultimately, we all are paying the price for that because it's so easy. But everyone's sort of kind of bobbing and bouncing into these bad experiences, and then we're left to try to create confidence in that environment, which can be struggling. Sometimes I feel like more of a therapist than an engineer. So.
I like that a lot. So besides these individual efforts of trying to make better products, address the actual customer needs, Dan, can you tell us what is the LoRa Alliance doing to help solving complexity and making LoRa solution cross the chasm?
Yeah, so you're right, Josh. Lots of different companies all offering different parts of the ecosystem: devices, gateways, network servers, platforms. It's a pretty diverse ecosystem, and one of the reasons why it's been successful is because of best of breed. Not trying to be one company that does everything. Collaborating, which was a point brought up earlier on, right? Collaboration, pulling it all together. But when everybody is in their swim lane, how to do that without having to dial up 1-800-JOSH, parachute me in a bunch of design engineers and system integrators. And so LoRa Alliance has done some good work with barcode scans so that you can encode all of the keys and the addresses of the devices, the dev EUIs. So I think that's enabled the installer guy who's OT, he's not really even IT, he's certainly not a telco guy. That's enabled him. One of the big issues with LoRa is it's not IP connected generally, right? And so you need some intermediary to then take the data and carve it all up and send it somewhere to an IP address that's expecting it. And with so many sensors, everybody did that differently. So having a standardized way in which you can access a repo and having a format of how you decode your devices, and big shout out to the Things Industries for leading the whole repo thing there. So number of ways in which we're trying to reduce that complexity, because we won't hit hyperscalability without it.
So
a real quick point on that, though. I think what's interesting and we have to remember about technology is we're working on a car while we're driving down the road. And so I agree with you. We're making big strides, but we're also driving down the road, and there's people releasing devices that don't have that QR code standard yet. And so that's sort of the challenge, is you're both trying to get somewhere and working on it at the same time.
A little Darwinism, really, to your psychological thing there. Good stuff will scale and bad stuff will fail, and it sucks if you're the one caught up on the bad stuff, but I mean that's every industry, right? Pick your partners wisely.
So your comment about the way the registry and the work done to formalize the way device sensors data is described, and that was not in the script, but that question just came up in my mind. What's the importance of getting together around digital twin definitions, like model definitions, languages for this kind of modeling and twin definitions. What's the need there, and how is LoRa and the LoRa Alliance, able to contribute?
I mean, I'll take that. I think, yes, common data model, common definitional language. We're still in a state where IoT is largely an aftermarket product. If you look around you, it's mostly about retrofit, at least in the industrial space. It's retrofitting existing equipment. And you can do that on a relatively kind of end-to-end custom basis. The next phase of IoT is going to be the product's connected and it comes connected. And there, when you have different suppliers of heavy equipment providing you with already connected devices which are embedded with sensors throwing off data, if we don't have a common data model and we don't have a common way of talking about digital twins, that's going to be even more complicated than we are today. So I think it's absolutely critical. It's very difficult to agree, though. What I think is the best data model might not be what you think is the data model. And so, we've got to come together and make some compromises.
Yeah. So I've been following Thread and Matter. So, in the home IoT space, this whole thing around trying to have interoperability, which we all know is really hard, right? Because everybody's trying to get the piece of the action. But I do think that's really important. But I think the driver here is actually standards. And I'm really passionate about standards. I mean, you think of the Phillips screwdriver, right? We're talking old standards and even rail gauges. And I think the time will come when that will really pull its play. I love the term collaborative IoT because I think that it just doesn't make sense for us to duplicate. There's so much waste in this world. We've got to get on board with it. And I think... also even down to the supply chain, when we're putting sensors out there, we've got to retrieve those sensors also in an environmentally sustainable way. So I think there's some really great opportunities if we look at challenges, collaboration, but I think standards are really going to help here.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks, Catherine. I think collaboration definitely is the key word here. We are running out of time almost. Thank you all for participating today. Any question from the audience for our panel here? Yes, no? I did a good job then.
Did a good job.
Okay, thank you all. Thanks for coming today. Thanks
everyone.
Thanks.